Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am here for my LEC Spring Split 2023 Finals overview and analysis video. Incredibly excited to get to this one. This is one of the more exciting finals in quite a while in the LEC, in my opinion, if only because it's two teams that we really didn't expect to be here at the beginning of the split. Now, one maybe a little bit more so than the other, but even that one was probably more of a surprise now than it was back then. And so a lot of really interesting matchups going on. BDS versus Mad is one of the probably most interesting scenarios and I think outcomes we could have got. But I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on it down in the comment section below. Who did you want to win and who did you think was going to win in this series? Of course, if you want to know my thoughts on all of these teams, on all the playoff series up until this point, up in the iCard right now, you're going to be able to check out a playlist of every single LEC Spring Split video that I have made. That's all 3 regular season weeks. That's every single group stage video, and it's also every single playoff series up until this point. And so, if you want a good idea of where I think BDS and Mad Lions are coming into this series, well, those videos are phenomenal to check out, and obviously, watch time really helps out the channel. I really do appreciate you guys, but without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking and start previewing Team BDS versus Mad Lions in our 2023 Spring Split Finals. Very interesting matchup. BDS has just kind of rocked their way here. They have yet to lose a game outside of the regular season. They've only lost 2 games in Spring Split, both of them being in that regular season. Undefeated in groups, undefeated in the first round matchup that ended up getting them here to the finals. And so they've, they're on fire. There's no other way to say it. They are absolutely on fire right now in the progression and development of a lot of their players, not only in terms of individual success, but in terms of being able to adapt to what the team needs has been super noticeable. Adam was maybe the MVP of the entire regular season, and even he's taken a backseat role in a lot of their recent success in the group stage and the playoffs. Him being on tanks, I think, has been a big positive for BDS. Crowny and Lebrov have maybe just been the best bot lane in Europe. I honestly don't even think it's arguable. I just think they have been over the course of Spring Split, and that's ridiculously impressive. If you would have told me that at the beginning of the year, I would have been entirely surprised, but they have come together and really been the best versions of themselves. And Sheo and Nuke have developed a really nice jungle mid synergy. I think Sheo was really good in the regular season. He's developed so quickly, a lot quicker than I expected him to. And Nuke, for being the player that got the least amount of resources, I would say, in the regular season, has really stepped up in the group stage and in the playoffs. It really is everybody on BDS. There's not a weak link on this team. Everybody has gotten them to this point, and they are a dangerous team to be reckoned with. As for Mad Lions on the other side, people have counted this team out over and over across the split so far, and yet here they are in the finals, and this is back-to-back for them. They lost the finals in winter, and they are right back here in spring, hoping to reverse their fortunes. Elyoya and Niski have been phenomenal, but Chasey's best of 5 performances have continued to solidify. This is pretty much exactly what happened in winter. Chasey had a regular season and then was fantastic once we got to best of 3s and best of 5s. That happened again here in spring, and then Karzi and Hillisang, I think, have been really consistent across the best of 5s. A big reason why they are here, but as for matchups, I have no idea. I think if I had to pick, everybody on this channel knows, I'm a big fan of Mad Lions. I just like this team. I think that they are incredibly underrated, and they probably were the direction I would have gone in, but BDS is certainly not a team you can overlook. They've been dominant up until this point. They've played the least amount of games of anybody in the playoffs. Mad Lions has played the most amount of games of anybody in the LEC by a large margin, so it's going to be momentum versus recent success. It's going to be really interesting to see how this one goes, but of course, we're going to be taking a look at it game by game, starting with game number 1, and game number 1 was a BDS win. They are able to take game number 1. Taking that game is super important towards the outlook of the series. I talk about this in pretty much every single playoff video, but you want to start a series 1-0. You want to be able to put yourself in a position where momentum is on your side, especially for both of these teams who both have a lot of momentum going into the series. Being able to kind of continue that momentum in game number 1 here, I think, was super important for BDS. And, no flame to Mad Lions. This game was super duper close, but BDS definitely showing why they got here towards the back half of this game. They're not a team that can be overlooked. Mad threw a lot of the things at them that they threw at teams that they were able to beat earlier on in the playoffs, and BDS responded phenomenally and were able to close out the game. So what ended up happening in this one? Well, it was a very back and forth early game. Both teams really making a lot of good plays. Mad Lions getting first blood off of Karzi being super aggro in the bot lane, catching out Lebrov, just being a little bit too aggro, a 1-for-1 fight in the jungle at 10, but really where BDS starts to generate the lead that I would say they get in the early game is second dragon, where Sheo comes in and is able to steal the dragon. Massively big smite from him coming out here. And then Nuke and Crowny just play really, really well in that fight. Positioning is fantastic. Nuke is doing a ridiculous amount of damage on this Cassio, and that's where BDS is able to generate, I would say, most of their early lead, if you want to call that. It's nothing consequential. It's nothing massive, but they were able to get a pretty nice lead there. The mid game, though, that's where things start to get crazy close. And like, I can't describe it enough. There was not a lot of separation between these two teams through most of this game. BDS did have a lot of pressure, but Sheo gets caught in the jungle. BDS tried to save it, but Matt ends up winning the fight to be able to pull back to relatively even. They're able to get second Herald and tie up the gold, and at 20 minutes, it's basically a completely even game. Both teams have pretty much entirely equal amounts of pressure, and it's really going to be about what you do from this point onwards that actually makes any sort of difference in this game. And actually, the team, I should say, to kind of separate themselves here is Mad Lions. It's not going to be BDS, it's Mad that actually kicks off the late game with some really nice plays. They end up getting Baron, the first Baron of the game, which is super duper important towards them, and they're looking to push through mid lane. They're looking to try to make some plays, but that's where Sheo comes in, a phenomenal flank on the Vi to be able to completely disrupt what Carzzy wants to do. He goes down immediately, and Mad just doesn't have the damage to be able to continue that fight. BDS is able to shut off the Baron. They're able to really shut down a lot of what Mad is able to do, and then we get to that late game. BDS get that second Baron. They go for some more team fights. They play them really well, and although there are a couple of hiccups here or there, for the most part, BDS from the late game, once they're able to punish Mad for being a little bit too quick in how they wanted to play a great flank by Sheo, they are able to close out the game. Player of the game for me simply has to go to Crowny. Like, there is no debate. His positioning is perfect. He's the best ADC in Europe right now, and I don't even think it's really all that debatable. Over the past, like, month or so, there's just not really been a lot of players on his level. You know, as much as I was hyping up a player like Exakick in Winter, I was like, oh, he was probably the best ADC in Winter. He was probably the best ADC in Winter, but the way that Crowny is playing right now in Spring, this is the best that we've seen an AD carry in 2023 in Europe. It's just not close. His positioning, his micro is so good. Now, laning, that's where it can be a little bit more of a question mark. He's not necessarily great playing these like super big hyperscalers early on in games, but most of the time it doesn't really matter because his mid game is so explosive that he's gonna hit that hyperscaling point. He's gonna be able to play Zeri in the late game, and it's not really gonna be that much of a problem. This was basically a perfect game from him, and I really don't think you could have asked for any more out of an AD carry. And the other player that I really want to shout out, it's not Sheo, we'll get to him in a bit, but it's Nuke on this Cassio. Man, Nuke has been really good throughout the playoff run here for BDS. I know that a lot of people said he was quote-unquote like the weak link, and I think if you're looking at it in that way, I guess technically it's true just because I think Adam, Sheo, Crowny, Labrov were all stellar, but Nuke was also stellar, right? Like, it's not like he was bad. This is a five-pronged attack, and Nuke is proving that. Cassio has been a pick that this team has wanted to go to over and over again. It's probably Nuke's best pick, and he's clearly proving that. The improvement that he has been able to make across this year so far, when I was calling him the worst mid laner in the LEC in 2022, it's just super impressive. You put some teammates around him, and he's obviously gonna be able to play. He had a great early game. It was Crowny that kind of took over in the late game, but Nuke was the one making all the plays and keeping them close in the early game. And then Sheo, obviously, some really big smites this game. The second Dragon Steel, the flank in the backline to be able to take down Carzzy when they had Baron. Some really, really good plays from Sheo. Now, sometimes he went a little bit over aggro. I think it was right after Mad got Baron that he goes in, he tries to ult, he tries to turn this fight, and he just gets insta-deleted, and then he goes for another flank when BDS have Baron, and he just gets blown up immediately because Mad's expecting it. But, you know, that's what's going to happen on Vi. Sometimes you're just going to go a little bit too deep. That's just what the champion does. But outside of that, I thought he was really good. Labrov had some questionable positioning mistakes. He was bailed out by the rest of his team, but this was a little bit of an uncharacteristic performance from Labrov. I will definitely say that. And Adam was fine on the Scion outside of the one time he got hooked from just being too aggro. But for BDS, it really was about Sheo, and then especially Nuke and Crowny in this one. They were dominant. As for Mad on the other side, definitely a frustrating way to lose game number one, but you got to keep your head in it. You made a lot of really good plays in this game. My dud of the game is going to go to Niski, but even Niski I thought had some good moments. I would especially say Hillisang had some really good hooks in this game that created a lot of opportunities. I thought Elyoya did a good job trying to create plays. Chasey really wasn't all that killable towards the back half, but they just didn't have a lot of carry threat coming out. Carzzy was good when he was allowed to be alive, but not a lot of peel coming out on the side of Mad, and Xayah was getting blown up way too early in fights, and then dud of the game was Niski. His damage in the late game was just not good enough. He wasn't landing charms quite like he was in that series against Vitality or even in that series against G2. We've seen the Ahri work for this team. It just didn't quite work here in game number one, but a lot of positives to take away for this team. You really held close up until the final moments of this game. I know the gold lead makes it look like it was like 5-ish K. That was all the end. That was all just taking inhibitors and taking Nexus towers. This game was completely even up until the final fights of the game. And so Mad definitely still in this series. They just need to retain some of their confidence. But for BDS, you gotta feel pretty good. You weren't even in this dominating position. You were able to survive an onslaught by Mad. You knew your win condition and you played to it perfectly to come out with a win. This is one of the most encouraging wins I think BDS could have had in game number 1, and I'm just hoping that they're going to be able to sustain it. But are they going to be able to do that, or is Mad going to be able to fight back and even up the series at 1 apiece in game number 2? Well, the winner of game number 2 was BDS. They are able to take game number 2. They're able to go up in the series 2-0 and really like take control. I mean, there's really no other way to say what 2-0 does for you in a series other than completely take control of the series. I believe this is true, but in a major region, I don't think any team has come back from being down 0-2 so far in 2023. Now, obviously, it's happened in the past. It happened many times at Worlds, but I think so far in 2023 in a major region, or at least in a region that I've covered on the channel, I don't think it's happened in the playoffs. So pretty big hole that Mad Lions have now found themselves in, but it really sucks because this is another game that they absolutely should have won. We talked about game 1 being, really close, and Mad definitely not, being outclassed, just kind of being outplayed towards the back half of the game. This one was even worse. I mean, they really had full control of this game, and a couple of really costly mistakes just end up costing them the entirety of this game, and it's pretty disastrous. You have to win 3 in a row now. You have to sweep BDS in order to not be eliminated, to not lose the finals, and that's a pretty tall task. So how did we end up getting here? What ended up happening? Well, this is actually a super similar early game to what happened in game number 1. In fact, a couple of the plays were almost identical. Mad Lions is able to pick up first blood on a 2v2 kill in the bot lane, the Brav just being overextended, getting caught out by a Hillisang flash Q with the Annie, and then Karzi doing F damage to be able to follow up. That happened in game 1, different champions, but same result. And then BDS kind of regaining the lead off of a really good first dragon fight, almost entirely identical as well, with the fact that they're playing Cassio Jinx and they're able to get some kills onto these champions to be able to kind of snowball them a lot easier. And so almost an identical early game from a couple of these teams. Now, Chasey does get a little bit stronger in the top lane. We'll talk about Adam for a bit here, but he didn't have the best game on the Malphite of all time, and Chasey was really, really good in this one, and he's able to pick up a kill in the top lane. That's really the only difference, though. Other than that, it feels very, very similar. Now, Mad, just like in game number 1, is actually able to get a pretty solid lead, although this one being significantly bigger. They're able to win second dragon fight, which is huge. It ends up being a 3-for-1. It looks like they're trying to overextend a little bit, but they end up being able to play it well enough to be able to pick up a ton of kills off of it, and that gives them a pretty solid lead. But really, where things start to go in Mad's favor, where things start to kind of get out of control, is Baron. Mad do exactly what they did in game number 1. They say, screw it, we're just going to go for Baron. And they get it. They're able to take it, and they're able to essentially trade 2 for 2 in the fight after, which is always going to be a win. The big problem, they now have to do something with Baron. And while they are able to create a couple of nice plays while they have it, Karzi just loses his mind for a second. I understand the thought process behind the play that he was trying to make in the mid lane here. He's trying to bait out Malphite ultimate because he thinks if he can get that out while hitting nobody, then they just win the fight for free. And, in a vacuum, he's right. And so he plays super aggro. He ends up using his E, and Adam sees that, so he goes in for the Malphite ult, and Karzi stopwatches it. Great. This is exactly what he wanted to happen. He forgot there was a Jinx on the enemy team who just throws down traps right on top of his stopwatch, and he comes out, gets trapped, and dies immediately. And all of a sudden, that Mad Lions lead that they had is gone. Like, Karzi got caught. They are still in the lead, but Baron is gone, and they no longer have the pressure. They're going to have to wait out the game a little bit more, and they're going to have to win another close fight. And then he gets caught out again in the mid lane. He gets caught out a second time, and that's really where things are, like, disastrous. Like, this is where it stops being playable on the side of Mad. BDS end up getting Baron. They only have 1 inhib tower. That's pretty insane, but they have it bot lane, so they just run bot lane. They force it, they funnel it through bot, only take the 1 inhib tower, they fight in the base, and they're able to win it, and they're able to close out the game. But unfortunate stuff for Mad. BDS was kind of gifted a shot back into this game and back into this series, and unfortunately, that's just sometimes how the cookie crumbles when you're a team like Mad Lions. But for BDS, they did take advantage of a lot of the opportunities that Mad gave them in the mid to late game. I'm still a little bit worried about their early game because they didn't play it all that great, but you've got Malphite, Maokai, Cassio, Jinx. Like, I understand why you're not dominating in the early and mid game quite like a team that is super poke-oriented. Jace, Zoe, Ezreal. I mean, it is really hard to contest a lot of objectives in the mid game if that Jinx and Cassio aren't ridiculously online. And for BDS, as soon as Mad Lions started making some positioning mistakes, as soon as that poke advantage started to become a little less relevant, then they were able to make a lot of really good plays. Crownie is going to get my player of the game again here in game number 2. He's been sensational through the first 2 games of this series. Hasn't exactly been the best in lane. Labrov, I think, has definitely been a bigger problem in lane, but, you know, Mad Lions has done a good job generating early leads in some matchups that they probably should generate early leads in, but he's so ridiculously consistent in late game team fights that it never really matters. His positioning is great, his ability to prioritize the correct targets, and the team's willingness to be able to peel for him was fantastic. Labrov, you know, made some questionable plays in this game. He also made some unbelievably great plays. That flash, that literal pixel perfect flash was one of the most unbelievable things I have ever seen in League of Legends. Go check it out if you haven't. Really great play from him, even if he continues to get caught out early on in laning phases. For the most part, he was definitely a positive for the team, but I want to see a little bit more of the consistency. Maybe the highlight plays are going to be even more highlight if he's not stepping up as much as he is. Nuke was good. Shale was solid. Adam was a little bit meh in this game. I think the Malphite pick was fine. I think obviously ultimates can be relatively fine so long as you're hitting a priority target. He never really got that big one off that affected like the entire game, but he kind of got like destroyed in lane by the Jace, and so not exactly what you want to see out of the R5 counter pick, but for the most part, he was like survivable. He was just probably the worst performing member of the team, but Crownie and Labrov were definitely enough to be able to win a lot of these team fights and to give BDS that 2-0 lead. As for Matt on the other side, God, this is heartbreaking. Done of the game has to go to Carzzy. He was really, really, really good before the late game. That mid game coming out from the Ezreal was sensational. He was doing a lot of damage. He was capitalizing on the sleeps that Niski would hit, or on the engages that Elyoya would have, or Hillisang, or a chasey shock blast that brings someone down to low health. He was doing a great job being able to capitalize on his team's positive plays, but he just threw it all away in the back half, just being way too aggro, not exactly respecting the enemy team's damage and respecting the enemy team's ability to, you know, punish him for his mistakes. And quite frankly, if Carzzy doesn't make those mistakes, they win this game. It really isn't all that controversial of me to say that. I don't think it was just him, but you know, towards the back half of the game, he did not play well. Chasey was awesome this game, though. He was definitely the best member of Mad Lions. Love the Jace for him. Obviously, it's kind of his signature pick for a reason at this point. There's a reason it's been banned out against him basically the entire playoffs. I would expect that to continue. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you want to drop the Rakan ban, but we'll see. The Jace was really, really good, though. Everything else was just kind of meh. Niski found some good picks throughout parts of this game, but was also relatively low damage on the Zoe in the back half of the game. Certainly couldn't keep up with Cassio. Hillisang found some nice picks, but also the Annie is just going to fall off super hard if you're not ahead. And then Elyoya. The Vi didn't really synergize well with the rest of the comp, but he played the back half, I would say, relatively well. This was like Chasey winning a lot of fights and Carzzy winning a lot of fights, and then all of a sudden they couldn't win those fights anymore. And so unfortunate for Mad Lions, but just sometimes how the cookie crumbles. They got to retain their mental. They are one game away from being eliminated, and like I said, it is very difficult to come back from being down 0-2. They have to win 3 games in a row now if they want any chance at being able to call themselves champions and to go to MSI. But for BDS, you put yourself in just about as good of a position as you possibly could have up until this point. You just got to be able to hang on. So are they going to be able to do that, or is Mad going to be able to pull back and at least make this a series here? Well, we're going to find out in game number 3, and the winner of game number 3 was Mad Lions. They are able to take game number 3. They're able to stay alive in this series, and they're able to do it on their terms. They did it in quite dominating fashion, probably the most dominant game of the series up until this point. Games 1 and 2 were relatively close, but game 3 was not really at all at any point. There were a couple plays that BDS made that were interesting, I guess you could say. That's probably a word you could use, but for the most part, Mad just kind of dominated this game, and they were definitely the better team. A lot of their players came out and looked about as good as you would want them to. So what ended up happening? Well, really slow early game, and actually I do think this benefits Mad. When you look at the two comps you're looking at, yes, you're going like Zeri to Jinx. It's hyper carry versus hyper carry, but Jinx is really good late game insurance for a comp that I do think has a lot of ways to give her the tools that she needs. Like, you've got the Syndra, you've got the Wukong, you've got the Malphite, but those are a little bit higher execution than something like Cassante Vi, right? Where you can just kind of go in. Even the Thresh is going to give Jinx basically everything she needs in the late game, and so Mad's perfectly fine trading off pressure in the early game. Now, Carsey does get dove. That's really the only bit of action that happens in the early game. They answer that with a nuke dive later in the game in the bot lane, but really the only things that happen in the early game are a couple of objective takes on the side of BDS, and Mad Lions just kind of getting picked off in the bot side of the map, but they get a lot of that pressure back topside, where Adam is just not having a very good series up until this point. The Malphite gets kind of duked out by the Cassante top lane, where he's just losing super hard, down 50 CS, almost getting solo killed by the Cassante. Just not something that you really want to see if you are a BDS fan, and then he ends up getting picked off in the bot lane, and that's pretty disastrous for this team. It allows Mad Lions a bit of momentum, a bit of map control is the way I put it, and they're allowed to get some vision up, and that's how they know the BDS is coming to try and contest this Baron, and Mad say, screw it, we're going to go for the full fight now, and they fight it so well. It's in topside jungle, you know, around Baron, and Mad plays this fantastically. Chasey, in particular, plays this absolutely beautifully. He's just unkillable on this Cassante at this point, being super far up, and Mad's able to take that fight. They're able to pick off Sheo a little bit later, and they're able to get Baron, and from that point in the game, it's just a slow stranglehold to close it out. There really isn't a lot of, like, active plays that I can tell you that they made, not because they didn't make them, but rather because they didn't have to. They just kind of got Baron, and they were able to suffocate out BDS. Now, BDS do go for a fight, which is good. You know, they should try and at least survive this game. They basically pour everything into trying to kill Carsey on this Jinx, and they do it. But the problem is that this Cassante is super far ahead, and he's able to just basically 1v9 at this point in the game, and so them dumping everything into the Jinx just leaves the Cassante free to destroy everybody else on the backside. Carsey ends up getting his Penta in the final fight, and Mad's able to close it out. Just a really clean game. Honestly, not a lot of complaints and not a lot of notes on the side of Mad. Player of the game is pretty easily Chasey up in this top lane. Something just clicks in his head. Something changes when he gets into best of fives. He's been a significantly different player in best of fives, both in winter and in spring, than he is in the regular season, and it's definitely for the better. That is definitely the case here. He's been phenomenal in this series so far. Adam's really not been able to keep up with him, even in the wins, and Chasey really proving that. I think he did like 7k damage in the final fight of this game on freaking Cassante. This champion is so stupid, but Chasey played it well, and certainly deserves his flowers for this. Couple other players, Carsey obviously getting his Penta, definitely deserves a shout out. Really nice bounce back after what was just kind of a mental collapse in game number 2. Hylissang was phenomenal. He's not going to get nearly the kind of credit that he deserves for how well he played the Thresh in this game. He couldn't miss a hook in the back half, and his peel was phenomenal. Niski was great in a couple of these team fights, not necessarily super influential towards the back half of the game, but certainly played the Ahri at a high level, and Oyoya was good on the Vi as well. You know, securing objectives, knowing that it's okay to give over some of the early dragons if they're going to be able to get towers and you know, pressure and lanes on the rest of the map. Just good overall play from Mad. It was definitely a Chasey-focused game, but everybody on the team definitely held their weight. For BDS, though, not a great game number 3. Obviously, you're still up in the series 2-1, so you don't want to hit the panic button or anything, but Adam's performance this series so far has certainly not been encouraging. He's going to get my dud of the game in game 3. He was pretty bad on this Malphite in game 2 as well, and so I think it's just a pick that I would move away from, even on R5. Like, I understand that, you know, I understand the idea behind Malphite, right? You're going to be able to be useful in the late game, even if you're not super far ahead, but maybe giving Adam something that he can express a little bit more in the early laning phase. Like, yes, Olaf and Darius are banned out, but his champion pool isn't that small. In fact, it's really, really big, and so interesting to see them go back to the Malphite again. I understand that they like to go for a more crowny, nuke-oriented carry style, especially in the playoffs here, but maybe change that up a little bit, considering it hasn't necessarily worked here and you have at least one game to play with. But nobody else on the team played great. Crowny couldn't actually get into any of these fights. The Zeri was legitimately useless. Nuke had 0 damage the entirety of this game and had no pressure on the Syndra. Sheo was just getting caught out in multiple, you know, circumstances. Yes, he was getting early dragons, but Mad was happy to trade those for pressure elsewhere on the map. It just wasn't a very good game for BDS. You can sit there and point fingers, but I really don't think there was one specific player that was quote-unquote at fault for how this game went. This was mostly just BDS kind of getting outplayed, and, you know, obviously you're not going to hit the panic button. You're still up 2-1, and you could very well bounce back in game number 4, but you got to be able to do it in game 4. You certainly don't want to go to a game 5 after having just lost 2 in a row. Momentum is certainly not on your side in that manner, but at least show me that you're going to be in this series. At least show me some good things, right? BDS controlled up until this point. Hopefully game 3 is an outlier for them, but for Mad, great, you won game 3, that's fantastic. You gotta do it again, and you gotta do it again after that. It doesn't end here. This is just the beginning if they do want to hold that trophy up at the end of the day. And so for Mad, are they going to be able to win game 4 and force us into a pretty surprising game 5, or is BDS going to show that game 3 was a little bit of an outlier? Well, the winner of game number 4 was Mad Lions, they are able to take game number 4. They're able to even up the series at 2 apiece, and they are sending us in the LEC finals to a Silver Scrapes game number 5, and I'm incredibly excited for that. I was worried after the first 2 games that it was just going to be a little bit of a blowout. BDS had not lost a game in the best ofs up until this point, and for Mad to be able to come back down 0-2 and dominate the games 3 and 4 quite like they did, it's just super impressive. You know, I haven't talked about game 4, but this was a destruction. This was not close at any point in the entire game. This was Mad just asserting their dominance against BDS, and it was still a lot of fun to watch. A couple of players in particular playing really, really well, but everybody on the team really showing up and showing out in this one. So let's go ahead and talk about what happened. Early game is entirely defined by one player, and that is Chasey on the top side with this Jace. You cannot give him Jace. I thought we already learned this in game 2. He almost pulled off game 2. I don't want to say by himself, because the rest of the team played okay, but he almost pulled off game 2 by himself, and he's really, really good at this champion. He showed that all split in winter. He showed that almost all split in spring. This champion's been perma-banned against Mad Lions, and not only do you give them the Gragas, which I know some people are frustrated by, but Gragas wasn't the, decision maker in this game, but you gave him the Jace, and that's a bigger problem, and Chasey definitely punished them for that. BDS tried to go for a counter gank in the top lane. Yoya plays really aggro. They try to dive at him early on here because of Jace's early power spike, and Sheo smartly tries to counter gank it and really tries to bait them in, but Chasey just outplays it so hard. They're able to pick up the kill on Adam. Chasey is able to kind of knock Sheo back, and then Sheo ends up trying to go in, but Niski has made the roam up, and he ends up dying, in that exchange as well. And so just great stuff overall to double kill top lane for Sheo, and then, or for Chasey, I should say. And then he just solo kills Adam. Now, this is a close trade. This is much closer than some of the trades that Adam has been in across this series so far, but still, it's just another solo kill for Chasey. And then Mad Lions goes and invades Sheo and the enemy jungle at their wolves, and who gets the kill there but a fadeaway shock blast from Jace. Just Chasey everywhere on this map, creating so much havoc and so much panic on the side of BDS. They have absolutely no answer for him, and it lets Mad get this massive lead in the early game. I mean, he's probably up 3 or 4k gold at 10 minutes into the game by himself. Like, it is that absurd how big of a lead he was able to get. Now, mid-game was kind of categorized by BDS just getting caught out, just being in bad positions over and over again. A couple of times, Labrov getting caught out on the Thresh, just being way too far forward. He literally ints one of them away in the bot lane. I don't know what he's doing, and then he gets caught by a Gragas barrel in the mid lane as well. But Adam continuing to get punished in the top lane. He gets punished in the bot lane as well, with Chasey continuing to be super aggro. It's just play after play after play of BDS getting caught out, and really there's not a lot that they can do, if we're being entirely honest. They are able to pick up a kill on Hilly, but Labrov gets caught immediately after that, and so it's just bad play after bad play after bad play on the side of BDS. And then eventually, I have written in my notes, Mad win everything. They win fights, they win objectives, and they end. That's what I have written as the final note for this game. It's just not close. I mean, they're legitimately up by like 10k gold at 15 minutes. It's just not close, and they're able to close it out relatively easily. It's not particularly difficult for them. A lot of players on Mad played well, but player of the game's Chasey. It's not close, dude. The dude was so ridiculously dominant in this game. This is one of the scarier top lane games I've seen in a long time, and it's against Adam, who's had a great year up until this point. And this is just Chasey, man. We just talked about him in the previous game, but, best of 5, playoffs Chasey is a different beast, and especially on Jace. You can't give him this pick. He's gonna do this. He's gonna absolutely massacre you and your entire team like he did here and lead him to a 23-minute victory, only losing 1 tower and giving up 5 kills, all of which were, kind of Hill is saying, just being a little bit too over-eager, but just Chasey was so good in this one. Carzzy was also really good. Another really good game from him. He was really aggro in this game. I mean, he was walking up to the Vi and just like autoing, forcing the Vi to run away, which is just such a funny visual as a Xayah, but he absolutely had the right to do that. He was super far up in gold, and there was really not a lot that Sheo could do in this game, but Carzzy and Chasey, definitely the 2 members of the team that I think stood out the most. Niski had some good picks on the Gragas. I think his macro was really good this game, and now Yoya, I think you could say the same thing, but they weren't necessarily giant pieces in terms of carrying the game. Hillisang was much better than his score would indicate. He did actually create a bit for Mad Lions, just was a little bit over-eager in certain circumstances, but this was Chasey's game. Like, there is no other way to say it. It's really been his series up until this point. Even that game 2 that they ended up losing, he was phenomenal, and games 3 and 4 have really just been him gapping Adam in the top lane, and that continued here. Done of the game on the side of BDS. I think a lot of people are going to want to see the Cassante get this, but I'm going to give it to Labrov on the Thresh. The amount of times he was just in no man's land for no reason. I think he's not getting nearly the kind of negative reception that I would have expected him to get in a circumstance like this. I don't think he's a bad player. Obviously, I've sung the praises of Lebrov forever, but he's had a bad day. This has not been a very good finals up until this point for Lebrov. Him and Adam in particular have been big hindrances for BDS, and honestly, they've been the players that are holding them back. I think Crownie has been awesome across today. He was good enough in this game where they could have won. Obviously, didn't have a lot of space to be able to make plays, and I think Nuke has not necessarily been a problem either. The Casio pick has obviously been really good across the first couple of games. He just, again, hasn't had the opportunity to do too much, but it's the ancillary pieces that have been a problem for BDS. It's Adam and Lebrov that have been hugely negative. I think Sheo has just not had a lot of pressure in this series. Not that it's entirely his fault, but I do think he's been outplayed by Elyoya across this so far, and so for BDS, like, you've got to figure this out, and you've got to figure it out, like, now, because this was a demolition. There really isn't a lot of analysis I could give. Your momentum is gone. You have to prove that you can rally yourself and bounce back. It's not Mad that needs to rally anymore. We're going to a Game 5. It's win or go home. It's you know, winner goes to MSI, winner wins LEC. Like, there is a lot on the line in this next game, and if you're BDS, you simply have to forget that games 3 and 4 happen. You have to be able to adapt, because it really does feel like you've been figured out, and you have to be able to bring out that confidence that you had at the beginning of this series. And then for Mad, just carry this over. You have looked so dominant in games 3 and 4. If you can just play the same style over and over again, you're gonna do just fine. You're gonna look really, really darn good. And so Mad definitely going into the final game with a little bit of a mental advantage, but BDS definitely not a team you can count out. Who is going to be heading to MSI? Who is going to be lifting the LEC trophy at the end of the day? Is it going to be BDS or is it going to be Mad Lions? Well, we're going to find out in game number 5, and the winner of game number 5 was Mad Lions. They are able to take game number 5. They are able to come back from being down 0-2 in this series, and they are your 2023 LEC Spring Split champions. Incredibly excited for this team that everyone doubted, that everyone wrote off. Well, they have proven everyone wrong at this point. They are heading to MSI. They are your champions, and they've earned all of it. There is no more debate on that. I still see a lot of people crying and clamoring about how this team doesn't deserve it. I don't understand that at all, because they went down 0-2 in this series, and a switch flipped in their brain, and they said, what if we just absolutely obliterate BDS across the final 3 games of this series? And that's what they did. A good game 3, a pretty dominant game 3, and then a really dominant game 4, and then a game 5 where they didn't die a single time in the entire game. Mad Lions coming to play and proving that right now, they're the best team in Europe. They made finals, both splits, and they won in spring. This is the best team in Europe. I think they have proven that at this point. And so let's go ahead and talk about how they get there. Again, this might be another relatively short one like Game 4 was, if only because there really isn't a lot of analysis to be done. This was Mad getting an early lead and just never letting it go. And so let's talk about how they got that early lead. They basically won every single trade that they took in the early game. Sheo gets picked off in his own jungle around 8 minutes. The game is relatively slow up until that point, but Mad is getting some small leads through laning advantages, but then Adam's caught in top river. BDS try to answer on the bot side, but they're not able to do anything. It's just play after play where Mad gets something and BDS does not get anything in return, and it's super positive for Mad overall. The best way I can put it is that they gain a really strong lead off of just their macro advantage, off of Niski moving around everywhere to make plays, off of Elyoya just out jungling Sheo in this one and creating so much havoc across the entire map, out of Chasey dealing so much damage basically everywhere that he is. It's Mad basically getting like a 15 or a 5k gold lead at 15-ish minutes into the game, and really where that comes to a head is in the bot lane. BDS feel like they finally found a pick that can get them back into it, onto Chasey, onto that Gwen, but it's just not enough. He survives way too long, he deals way too much damage, and in a 1v3, he, kind of comes out on top until the rest of his team shows up. They're able to pick up a delayed ace onto everybody on BDS, and from that point in the game, it's just over. Like, there's not really a lot BDS can do unless Mad Lions completely throw the entirety of this game, which, surprise, they don't. I feel really bad for a player like Crownie, who just didn't get the opportunity to play this game at all. The Gwen was on top of him in every single team fight on this Jinx, and Mad does a really good job controlling the game, taking Baron, not really leaving it up to a flip or to chance to, control the pit, and then just kind of brute forcing their way into the base and closing it out. It's everything you wanted to see from a team that was super far ahead. And I know it's maybe a little bit anticlimactic, but Mad's sheer dominance towards the back half of this series was certainly something to be marveled at. And I think all the players are to be congratulated for it. My player of the game is going to go to Chasey. I'm not going to delay it. Chasey's player of the series. It's not close. The dude was monstrous in this series for Mad Lions. The Jace game, the Cassante game in game 3, even both the Jace games, I should say. And then the Gwen in game number 5 here. I mean, every single game, he was the standout member of Mad Lions, and he was phenomenal for this team. It would have been an absolute shame if Finals MVP went to anybody else, and Chasey very much deserved it. Just another monstrous game. This wasn't quite as, like, Chasey dominant as I would say games 3 and 4 were, but I still think it was, him that was kind of the big main playmaker, I guess you could say. Elyoya definitely in conversation for player of the game in this one. Controlled the entire map. Pretty much every single play that he went for was a super positive one on the side of Mad, and, really not a lot of negatives to say there. Niski's roaming and his macro awareness really helped out this team a lot, and Carzzy and Hilly were happy to take a little bit of a step back and be a little bit of a secondary force on this team because Topside, quite frankly, just played so well over the course of the back half of this series. And so for Mad, super duper proud of this team. They have earned every bit of success that they have gotten in 2023, and I think it's finally time to stop sleeping on the Lions. As for BDS, though, on the other side, what a disappointing way to lose the finals. To be up 2-0 and to get reverse swept, it's got to be a miserable feeling, but this team is so young, this team is so mechanically talented, and they know how they like to play, and they like playing together. I have faith that this isn't the last time we're going to see them in some major best of fives this year. Hopefully, at the very least. Hopefully, they can carry some of the momentum that they got here in spring over, but unfortunately, today was just not going to be their day. My dud of the game in game number 5 is going to go to Sheo. I think you could give it to Adam. You could give it to Crownie and Labrov. I'm going to give it to Sheo. He was most notably out of position across most of this game, in my opinion. He didn't die nearly as much as the others, but I can't remember a play that he made, even negative, right? Like, he's just nowhere. Elyoya had complete jungle pressure. He was getting picked off in his own jungle. He was not coordinating with the rest of his team. It just felt like he was mega tilted by the time we hit game number 5, and it was definitely noticeable. But Adam was miserable in this series. I thought Labrov was pretty miserable in this series, especially across the back few games. It was really Nuke and Crownie that were kind of carrying the torch for BDS, and it just wasn't going to be enough. Like I said, Crownie really never had the opportunity to play at all here in game number 5, and so BDS's split is over. They're not going to be heading to MSI. Instead, they will have to regroup and they will have to bounce back in summer looking even better. And I have faith that this team can do that. I think if you can get Adam a little bit more comfortable on some of these champions, having Olaf and Darius banned out the entire series was definitely a problem for this top side. And then we see the Scion bans, putting him on something like Cassante or even the Malphite, like it just wasn't working for this team. And so maybe getting him a little bit more comfortable on those champions. But, I think with time, Sheo is only going to continue to get better. Crownie and Labrov are already fantastic, and Crownie, I should say, is already fantastic. Labrov just needs to show his regular season form and not, what he showed in today's series. This was definitely a non-typical experience for him. And then Nuke was good enough. Like, BDS is not far away. They were one game away from being LEC champions. It just wasn't meant to be this split. But for Mad, congratulations to this team. I'm really happy that they're the team we're going to get to send to MSI out of the LEC. And really, when we get to the MSI previews, I think people are going to be surprised how highly I think of this team when it comes to international competition. All right, but that is going to do it for my LEC Spring Split Finals overview and analysis, and that's going to do it for my Spring Split overview and analysis, not only in the LEC, but in every region that we cover. That's the last Spring Split video that's going to be released up next on the docket. MSI. Incredibly excited to get into that. Those videos are going to be pumping out over the course of the next week or so, and just in general, I really appreciate you guys. I hope you're sticking around for the MSI content, but all the support you've shown, not only on the LEC videos, but on every other region is also very much appreciated. It takes a lot of time and effort to watch all these games and make all these videos, but I love doing it for you guys. Obviously, it's my passion, and you guys clearly seem to be enjoying it, and so I'm really appreciative of you guys. You always comment and like and all that kind of stuff, but I would still be really appreciative if you could do that on this video as well. If you could leave a like, let me know that you guys are enjoying it, leave a comment, let me know what you guys think of the format, let me know what you guys think of Mad Lions, and of course, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. With MSI right around the corner, you definitely want to hit subscribe so you can get my pre-tournament, I guess you could say, power rankings, not only for teams, but players, as well as a meta report that I'm going to be doing around that time to let you guys know what champions you can expect. Just a lot of fun stuff coming up with MSI, and then, of course, we'll be covering every single game of the tournament, and so a lot of good stuff coming up. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell if you haven't already, but with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.